We need to talk about this because it is insane. Now, let me blanket state this. Film industry is a business built on art and artistry and collaboration and the unstoppable force that is storytelling that has lasted throughout the entire existence of humanity. And so we come at this very interesting time where film is a business and entertainment is a business, and through global pandemics and war and everything that happens, a consistent point of communal culture is film and television and the media that we consume. Of course, inevitably, in a capitalist society, businesses will form around that, structures will form around that, and incentives will exist around that. So, here in the United States, where Hollywood exists, most film and television productions do not actually film in Hollywood. They film all over the country. Over the past, let's say 25 to 30 years, film has been sort of scattered to multiple areas in the country, and the reason for that is because of everything I just said, right? There's so many jobs that come from film production specifically, but it has a massive trickle effect. So, for instance, in Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm based out of, Georgia became a massive booming hub for production, for entertainment production, for film and television. By the state of Georgia giving Hollywood productions a tax incentive, hey, you can write off taxes. We know the big guys on top of studios love to write off their taxes. Come film in Georgia, we will give you a massive tax write-off for the entirety of your production. That brings, obviously, the actual film itself here, which, call it tourism, call it whatever you want, general interest to the area. It creates jobs for people who are working in production, your grips, your production assistants, your set designers, your costumers, your makeup artists, all those people, typically they're not flown in from out of state. They're local here to where the production are. You're creating jobs for all those people. You're creating business and you're expanding service for home renters, hotels, drivers, food delivery, catering businesses, restaurants, weekend bars, weekend shopping. Productions don't work 24/7. They take breaks. People need to eat. People need to play, enjoy themselves. So there is such a massive, massive trickle effect when it comes to where a film does its production. On top of the fact of hey, it's a space that's creating art, it also has a trickle-down effect that affects so many people and so many in a local economy. Why do I bring all of this up? Georgia was maybe one of the biggest in the past 20 years or so that really jumped on that incentive, that tax incentive for productions to come here. But Georgia is also... Georgia leans in a certain direction politically, and a lot of these productions are based out of Hollywood and are very progressively minded or influenced by a lot of progressively minded people. So, because of recent political leanings since 2016, let's call it what it was, a lot of production companies were looking for other places to film. And so places like New Mexico, places like Chicago, which was really popular for a while, before Georgia really kind of took off. They've been kind of back and forth. So New Mexico, Chicago, they started going back to New York. They started going back to Los Angeles. There's a lot of different places, South Carolina, all these different areas within the states started to gain and garner more attention. And you have, like people are mentioning in chat, you have more productions happening because of streaming services as well. So we have a boom and a need for more production. Austin, Texas, I forgot to mention that. Oh my God, Austin is huge for production. All of that to say, companies then also start looking elsewhere because this tax incentive really does trickle down in so many different areas. So you have Vancouver is a huge spot for television production. The entirety of the CW Arrowverse, all the superhero shows were filmed in Vancouver. Most of the CW's productions are filmed in Canada. You have London, which is massive. Pinewoods has a massive structure out in London. Australia, massive film industry. You could almost point to George Miller and the Mad Max franchise for really reinvigorating that into the modern age. But, you have like the Thor movies film in Australia. So all of these things, right? So you have all this influence of production creates job, production boosts economy, production is really helpful for the local areas. And you have these companies that are like, we kind of lean in certain directions and we want to, do right by our people, the people we hire, our creatives, our directors, our writers, our actors, everything like that. So that's why you see companies starting to film all over the place. Now, all of that to say, yesterday, seemingly at random, as it always is, the current president of the United States puts out this message. I'm not going to do an impression, but I am going to read it. Movie industry... It's so hard not to do an impression. The movie industry in America is dying. Very interesting to say immediately after Sinners and immediately after Thunderbolts, but sure. A very fast death. Sure. Other countries are offering all sorts of incentives to draw our filmmakers and studios away from the United States. That is true. We just talked about London, the United Kingdom. We just talked about Australia. We just talked about Canada. There's other places like Jordan that do a lot of filming too. There's a lot of places in the United States that offer incentives too. But as vast and as massive as the United States is, you can't film Dune in the Las Vegas desert, right? Like you can't film Superman's Fortress of Solitude in like Salt Lake City, right? So we move on. Hollywood and many other areas within the USA are being devastated. Kind of, but not necessarily just because of... Look, okay, so this is where I do want to be frank about some of this stuff. There is a massive slowdown in production right now. The past 2-3 years has been extremely challenging for the film industry. I mean, even anecdotally, people that I know based out of Atlanta have been struggling to get consistent work like they used to. I even met someone recently. I was picking up some furniture from them off of Facebook Marketplace, and I was like, "Oh, like they're like, yeah, I just sold the house." I'm like, "Oh, why are you selling? You moving?" He's like, "Oh, well, we used to do long-term rentals of this house for people who filmed here in Atlanta, and because nothing's filming, this house sat empty for months, so we're selling it." I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." So like, there is an effect taking place because productions are not happening. I don't think devastating is the word I would use, but there's a lot of factors that lead to an economy being devastated. This is a concern. Okay, this is a sentence where it starts to get hard not to do an impression. This is a concerted effort by other nations and therefore a national security threat. Because London is stealing our Star Wars, it means they're coming after us. I mean, that's just absurd. That's like, how can you... It is a national security threat that Dune Messiah is filming in the actual Middle East and not. You know what? Lisan Al Gaib is coming for us, man. That's what it means. It is a threat. This is outrageous, right? Like, there was no. I cannot imagine a sensible person reading that sentence and thinking, yeah, that makes sense. It is, in addition to everything else, messaging and propaganda. What does that even mean? Why is it propaganda if a movie that takes place in London films in London? Why is it propaganda? Like, are you saying it's propaganda that, like, they're filming in Vancouver and they're pretending that it's a city in the United States? Because, like, they filmed in Chicago and told me it was Gotham City, right? Like, they filmed in Cleveland and told me it was Metropolis. They filmed in Atlanta and told me it was New York. Yeah. Therefore, I am authorizing the Department of Commerce and the United States Trade Representative to immediately begin the process of instituting a 100% tariff on any and all movies coming into our country that are produced in foreign lands. We want movies made in America again. What does that mean? What does a tariff on movies mean? And look, absurdity of everything aside, which is, it is absurd. We've just spent the last 15 minutes talking about how absurd this is. How do you tariff a production? How do you tariff a movie? There is not a physical good that is coming out of that. There is no. Do you put a tariff on the hard drives? You put a tariff on the film reels? What does that mean? Am I gonna go on my AMC stubs when I go? They're like, hey, sorry, this counts for 2 movies because they shot in Australia. What does that even mean? It is a completely baseless and non-thought-through concept. It is absolutely ridiculous. And it does not address the actual problems. Look, I'm not saying that this man has any sort of the jump scare. Tariff fees on movies, right? Like, is that the solution? Because who are you helping here? Because realistically, if you are upping the price of movie theaters because of a tariff on a movie not shot in the United States, that's actually hurting the American economy. That's actually hurting, AMC, even though it's a bit of a meme, has stockholders all over the country, American stockholders, everyday people who invest in AMC. Local movie theaters are owned by local businesses, are operated by everyday Americans, right? They're already hurting. Exactly. They're devastated, as you say. So putting a tariff, where does that money go? Is that money going back into the arts? Is that money going back into supporting these people? Because this is what really pisses me off about this whole idea of pretending that we actually care about the artists who are making these films, the productions. The devastation that he talks about from productions not happening locally and not happening in the United States or in the communities that they normally do is affecting contractors. It's not affecting, Scarlett Johansson and Selena Gomez and Christopher Nolan and John Watts. They're fine. The people who are hurting are Tom, who is, been a best boy key grip for 15 years, or, Sally, who's been a PA and just got out of college and got her first gig as a PA and hasn't been able to get a job since then. And where are these people? Right, they're 1099 contractors. They're not full-time workers. A lot of them do not have secondary income, so they're on Medicaid, they're on welfare, there are all these different systems. Are you telling me that the tariffs that you're putting on productions that are filmed overseas are going back to benefit them? Like, it's just not thought out. It's just not, like, look, if you actually wanted to solve, if the federal government for some reason decided it really cared about film production taking place in the United States, they would institute some sort of federal arts program that could contribute to or sponsor or partner with some of the unions that work in film and television to provide additional subsidies, to provide better support for the artists and the craftsmen and the people who work on creating these productions, to support them during their downtime. They would create grants and programs that would incentivize more smaller scale local productions. They would create subsidies and tax write-offs and incentives for smaller production companies to do more and more productions. They don't just slap a tariff. Like, all of these different things are how you actually solve the devastation that is occurring. And I say devastation in quotes because I think that's an exaggeration, but like, it is a real problem. It is a real problem for folks that there's not as many productions going on locally, but this is just not the solution. So, all of this to say, that was just thrown out randomly yesterday, and this morning we get the update that no final decision on foreign films tariffs have been made. Although no final decision has been made, the administration is exploring all options to deliver on President Trump's directive to safeguard our country's national and economic security while making Hollywood great again. You said it, Z. You said it. That's it. That's my whole take wrapped up into one chat. Look, so here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll actually say to kind of conclude this. Film is made globally because film is a global art form. And there are thousands, if not millions, of incredible, creative, and really talented people all over the world that contribute to making the TV shows, the movies, the web series, all these different things that you love to consume. So if you feel like you want to support those people, go watch their movies in the theaters, buy them on video on demand, rent them, do whatever you can so that they get a little bit more money in their pocket. And that's it. That's all you can do, right? As you and me, as an everyday person, that's all you can do. And do some research when you vote. All right, moving on, folks. Moving on. This is not a political stream. That was crazy. That's crazy, right, guys? That's crazy. My microphone. I'm going to bed because it's late. Isn't that?